Hello everyone, I'm Captain Logan and welcome to the Number One Show, the show where I let you know what number ones, jumping on points, and one-shots I think are worth picking up at the comic book store this week. Now I say this week, of course, these will all be books that by the time this video comes out will have been out for a little while, but you should still be able to get these pretty easily, and this should help you decide what books you might want to go look for and put on your pull list, what things might be worth waiting for trade, and stuff you just want to kind of keep your eye out for. So we're going to get into it here in just a second. As always, I want to say thanks to Elite Comics in Overland Park, Kansas for helping me out with the show. If you are ever in the Kansas City area, be sure to check out Elite Comics. It's an absolutely fantastic store. We sure appreciate everything they do for us. Got a quite a bit of books for you this week, and another really nice smattering, just like last time, of very different kinds of genres and things. Not a lot of superhero this week, and there's a thing I never thought I would say. Lots of stuff from different independent books, or different independent companies, but we've got one from the big two, from each of the big two as well. Let's just get right into it with a really interesting, quirky little book from Boom Comics. This is Wild's End, The Enemy Within, written by Dan Abnett of Abnett and Lanning, and with art by I.N.T. Culberd. This is a really different kind of, like I said, sort of quirky book. I've not read anything like this in comic book form really before. This is another anthropomorphic animal kind of book. Been seeing a lot of this kind of stuff lately, and I'm starting to get the sense that maybe writers are deciding to do a lot of more kind of talky dialogue and idea-driven books with animals, because that way there's something kind of more interesting to look at than just a bunch of boring-looking regular humans sitting around and talking about things. Maybe the idea is that that's supposed to justify the visual medium a little bit more, because this very easily could just be in a novel form. And but I feel like Abnett does a really good job, and Culberd's art is really good. It's very old-school storybook, and the premise here is that there's an alien invasion, and something horrible might be happening, and the world might be about to, to end. And there's a lot of social commentary about the way a government might handle something like this, using national security as an excuse to take away people's freedoms and that sort of thing. Of course, as I keep talking about a lot with various things, movies and comics and television, that is a very, very popular thing to talk about right now. But I like the situation here and the way in which that's presented. So this is a very British period piece, as I said, set with animals, and with the animals that, walk and talk like humans. And it's a very sharp-witted book. It is a science fiction story that talks about what science fiction is, and I think that's really cool. The government brings in the two most prominent science fiction writers, but one of them would not necessarily consider or would definitely consider the other one to not be a science fiction writer. One of them is a writer of hard science fiction, and the other is, as the first would say, a writer of popular tripe. And I like how Abnett uses each of the animal types to kind of run that point home more. So the dog is the writer of popular tripe, and the cat, who is a little bit more sophisticated and is a little more full of himself, is the and is also older, is the hard science fiction writer who thinks that the other guy isn't writing real science fiction. And that hit home for me, and I thought that the discussion of that was really interesting, and also a lot of witty banter in the way that their relationship unfolds. At first, they seem very happy to meet each other, and it looks like they're going to be the fast friends, but they end up being an unlikely duo, and they have to work together. but they very quickly have lost respect for each other, and I'm interested to see how the idea of what science fiction is and how it fits into the culture and what the point of it is works into this story. And then there's another group of animals that have found whatever alien thing it is that that landed, who are kind of more shady criminal characters, and one of them is a fox who is, of course, really sneaky and dodgy, and his name is Fox, but spelled F-A-W-K-E-S. So it's not an arbitrary choice to make these animals, and it certainly reflects and enhances their personalities. I think that for the most part, this is a book that's kind of for everyone, minus, I guess, references to alcohol, but that's not, I don't think, really that big of a deal the way that it's handled here. This seems like mostly an all-ages kind of book, but it is maybe more cerebral than your average all-ages book. It also has this kind of Chicken Little quality about it. I think maybe that's part of the reason that they're animals as well, because they kind of have this sky is falling attitude about what's going on. And anyway, I was pleasantly surprised by this. This is a thing that, and this is one of the reasons that I'm really happy I'm doing this show now, that I never would have thought to pick up if I wasn't just grabbing number ones that I was finding and reviewing them. So this is a thing that I definitely recommend if you're into especially British humor, but also if you like period pieces set around the turn of the century, and if you like kind of more cerebral but still quirky kinds of science fiction comics, this would definitely be your bag. Next up, it's the Death one-shot. This is from Xenoscope, and this comic is written by Joe Bruscia and Ralph Tedesco with art by Greg Bo Watson. I was not a big fan of this, and I immediately started to have kind of flashbacks to Spawn Year. It's got some really, or to Spawn when I was doing Spawn Year. This has some an interesting idea behind it, but I immediately wasn't sure I was buying the premise. Basically, the idea is that we have a personification of death. This is a little bit like DC's Death, but not, or it was DC's Death, Neil Gaiman's Death, but not nearly as interesting. But it's it's this really attractive young woman who goes around and is supposed to just basically be the Grim Reaper, but she's decided to take justice in her own hands and kill off anybody she thinks deserves it. And for whatever reason, this kind of mystical, dark Council of Elders has finally decided to do something about it, and I guess this is a character that Xenoscope has been publishing for a while, and I found myself immediately wondering why in the world this is just happening right now, because it seems like she's been going around and killing people she thinks deserve it for a long time. So there's a trial, and I thought it was odd that there's immediately a sentence before there's any mention of a verdict. It's just you're on trial, and then boom, here's your sentence. And her sentence is interesting, and this is the part I really liked, this idea that she is going to have to learn what it's like to be a human so she can relate to humans and appreciate them more, so that maybe she won't go around just willy-nilly killing anybody she thinks deserves it, figuring out what mortality is all about and how difficult it is to be a human being. And like I said, I liked that. She lives a whole bunch of the ends of people's lives, and then toward the end of the comic, she ends up having to live for a little bit longer and actually really get to know somebody. I didn't buy the ending any more than I bought the beginning. I don't want to give a ton of stuff away, but this ends with somebody helping her, and I guess I'll say this, and that council kind of letting that person get away with it and breaking another cardinal rule, even though this is all about breaking cardinal rules in the first place, and I just didn't quite buy the reasons that happened. It seemed a little bit thin. This is a very gratuitous, violent book, and it's a really over-the-top, vulgar book. I don't think it always earns that. It's not always bad, but a lot of the time it seems to be a little bit juvenile in the way that it handles interpersonal relationships, and it's kind of just trying to get the ball rolling in a lot of scenes where it just wants to ramp up the drama right away, so it's got people just yelling obscenities at each other without really building to that, so I mean, there's a book that's supposed to be about humanity with people that don't feel human at all to me. As I said, I just didn't really enjoy this all that much myself, and it reminded me of a lot of things in Spawn that I don't like, but honestly, the story was better than a lot of Spawn stories. I like this character. I think that there's definitely a lot of cool things that could be done with her, and it's possible that her other stories are much better than this one, but yeah, was not a big fan of that one. Next up, it's my one DC book for the week. This is the Harley Quinn Road Trip Special. This is an oversized $6 one-shot from DC, capitalizing once again, I think, kind of oversaturating Harley Quinn. She's been kind of everywhere right now, and DC's having a lot of financial problems at the moment, so they're capitalizing really hard on this character who is selling pretty well for them. Her monthly is doing really well compared to a lot of their other books, and so it's no surprise that, like Deadpool and Wolverine, at least, you know, before they killed him off at Marvel, that this would be a character that DC would be kind of throwing in our faces and publishing as much as humanly possible. This is another book that I really didn't care for. It's got its moments, but this is basically just taking Harley Quinn, Catwoman, and Poison Ivy, putting them in a car together, putting them on a road trip. It's a really typical thing to do with these characters, and could have been really funny and witty, but ultimately, I didn't laugh much, and there's not much more of a point to it. It's a really light, kind of fluffy book, and I didn't feel like this was for me, so I will say that, but part of the problem with it is that I don't feel like it sometimes knows who exactly it's for, because, oh, and you know what, I should probably mention who this is by the way, before I start ripping into it. This is written by Amanda Connor and Jimmy Palmiotti, with art by Brett Bluins for the first half or a little bit more, and then a few other people mixed in after that. But yeah, this feels like it's aimed mostly at like teenage and college age girls. There's a lot of really stereotypical kind of girly stuff that they go off and do. Like there's a part where they're in a motorhome and they're just playing Truth or Dare. And there's moments like that where I felt like there could be some insight into these characters, and we could kind of get a particular take on these characters, and kind of learn something new about them. But it's mostly just, like I said, kind of a fluff piece. It's trying to be. Well, and let me say this too, of course, because I was talking about how it can't decide who it's for. So it's mostly that, but then there are places where it seems like they're throwing in some eye candy for the guys that are reading it, and then there's an excuse for Poison Ivy to take her clothes off, and I'm not real sure who this is for. It reads like it thinks it wants to be a Deadpool comic. I've been having that with some Harley Quinn stuff lately, and I'm not a big fan of the monthly. I've read an issue here or there. The last one I reviewed was kind of interesting in stuff that it was doing with drug-induced hallucinations. This also has drug-induced hallucinations, isn't nearly as interesting and even to look at. But anyway, with this, as opposed to the monthly, I mean, there's just very little story, and it's more along the lines of the Bizarro comic, because that's also a road trip thing, and also more about the comedy than it is about the story, but there's still more story being told in that book. And one thing I did like about this is that they do run into Bizarro and Jimmy on their road trip in this, and I thought that was kind of fun, but it doesn't have that same kind of fast-paced, a laugh out loud every couple panels kind of feel to it, and that's a lot of why I didn't really enjoy it too much. It's really, really wordy, and as I said, it kind of wants to be a Deadpool comic. Every now and again they'll have a Harley Quinn breaking the fourth wall thing. She's been doing that some lately, but it's not really in panel, except for during a drug-induced thing, and that's whatever, I guess. I guess the rule is if you have if you're hallucinating, you can know you're in a comic because maybe you just think you're in a comic, but you're not really in a comic, whatever. But before that, there are a couple places where it's more of an editorial thing, where it's just like Harley Quinn inside of a circle, like outside of the fiction, saying, hey, this this is why this certain thing was done in the in editorial, and I don't know if that really counts as breaking the fourth wall, because I've seen that done in other comics, and especially early, and maybe it's just kind of aping some 60s and 70s stuff, but that's a thing that some old comics would do sometimes, where it wasn't really breaking the fourth wall. It was just kind of this jokey thing where it sort of felt like it was, but it didn't play into the narrative at all. And this doesn't either, but again, a lot of it kind of feels like it wants to be Deadpool, so I don't know if this is supposed to be a character who sort of knows she's in a comic or not. It's just a little bit, I don't know, it's a little bit ambiguous about that, but also in that every now and again it tries to be really disturbing, because of course these are supposed to be bad guys, and a couple of them are psychopathic serial killers, but most of the time they don't feel that way at all. And maybe that's supposed to be the joke, is that deep down at heart these are just three regular girls who like palling around with their gal pals, and then every now and again they kill somebody. But there's not nearly enough of that in this to drive the comedy, and if there was more of that, maybe it would have been a little bit funnier. It's weird to say this is not disturbing enough, but it's kind of not. And then with the couple times that they do something kind of horrendous, it's hard to believe that they're still able to go on this road trip without anybody trying to stop them. And there's a place where it looks like a police car is going to come after them, and then it doesn't, and they just keep going on the road trip. And it's like everybody's oblivious to who these people are and how insane they are. And so the story that is kind of bookending this, because we lose it real fast, it's not really about this that much, is that Harley Quinn has lost an uncle that was near and dear to her. I think it was an uncle, and she has to go retrieve his body, and so that's what the road trip is about. And I guess it's there to sort of humanize her a little bit, or mostly just to give us a reason for them to go on this road trip and make it about death. And it's just kind of odd, because none of these people seem to have any trouble like just going out in public and acting like they're normal girls, even though they've done like at least Catwoman or Poison Ivy and Harley Quinn. They've done all these horrendous things. So anyway, this was a really strange read. As I said, it's got its moments. There's a laugh every now and again. Ultimately, I didn't really care for it. Next up, going over to Marvel, it's Fury #1. This is written by David F. Walker with art by Lee Ferguson, and this is again published by Marvel. This is another one of these 50 years of S.H.I.E.L.D. one-shots, and I was surprised by how much I enjoyed this. This takes Nick Fury Jr., who was a character that I always thought was completely unnecessary. I thought was really goofy the way they put him in and gave him an eye patch. They make fun of the eye patch thing in this, and they kind of make me like him a little bit in this. They take Nick, and of course Nick Fury Jr. is basically just supposed to be like the movie Nick Fury and the Ultimate Nick Fury, but in the Marvel, but in the regular Marvel universe, because we're used to Nick Fury now looking like Samuel L. Jackson, so he's got to look like that everywhere. And this takes the way this opens is really interesting, because it's got paralleling stories that are happening side by side, with one set of panels set in 1965 and one set now in 2015, and they're both dealing with similar things. And then surprisingly, about 4 pages in, those subplots converge with time travel, and I was really surprised by that. I kind of thought maybe the whole issue was going to be like that, or maybe it was just going to like finish that 65 story quickly, just to give us this idea that things haven't really changed all that much in both the sorts of things S.H.I.E.L.D. has to deal with, but also in like race relations and bigotry and that kind of thing. This is a story about the hate monger, really appropriate to do in a tribute to Nick Fury, because the hate monger story, I want to say, was first in 1965, and we go back to that year and we deal with the original hate monger, whose soul, I guess, has possessed this other one now. And there's this really funny line where Nick Fury Jr. thinks maybe that's happened, and he said, well, we can't rule it out, because why not? He's basically thinking That these kinds of crazy things happen all the time. And sure enough, he's absolutely right, and that's exactly what's happened. And so he goes back in time and has to deal with his father without his father knowing that that's who it is, because of course they have temporal protocols now because there's been so much time travel. And back in 1965, there hasn't been yet, and so S.H.I.E.L.D. hasn't enacted those yet. I really like the relationship between these two guys and how much respect and admiration Nick Fury Jr. starts to build for who his father used to be. And he's realizing that this is a really different person from who he became in the future and all the way up to what ended up happening with Original Sin. I love the way Original Sin plays into this. It's a thing that I wondered if it would come up, and it ends up being a major thing in the very last page, and I really appreciated that. I thought it was really cool. This is thematically all about, as I said, kind of the more things change, the more they stay the same, whether or not asking the question if things really have changed all that much as far as how people look at each other and how people behave, and if we have learned from our mistakes. But then there's also this sense that that at least personally with Nick Fury, things were simpler in 1965, and that something changed him, and so maybe things have kind of changed a little bit, and there's kind of a discussion about that in this. All in all, really solid comic, really good. Pick it up and read it. One and done kind of story. And like I said, it made me kind of like Nick Fury Jr. a little bit more, and I like that about it. This, of the three of these I've read so far, of these 50 years of S.H.I.E.L.D. things, this is the best tribute thing, because it pays tribute to kind of all aspects of Nick Fury, who he was, who he's become, the second Nick Fury, all of that. And I think this is a really solid book. Next up, it's Power Cubed. Power Cubed from Dark Horse. This is written by Aaron Lopresti and also drawn by Aaron Lopresti. I was really impressed with this. I enjoyed this quite a lot. This is another book that is kind of an all ages thing, although I'd say maybe more of kind of a teen to adult kind of book. And it is really quirky and silly, but also has a ton of heart to it. And I was really impressed with how those two things were balanced. Where it opens with an incredibly silly and hilarious supervillain. The supervillain named Dr. Cruel, who has this kind of tick villain thing where he's like this ex-Nazi guy, and he's got a swastika, and he's got a and he has like a breathing apparatus thing, and he's just completely over the top, hilarious and nuts. And this guy is constantly obsessed with like mundane things and like what he's gonna have for dinner that night and that kind of thing. I laughed out loud at some of his dialogue. This plays with a lot of comic tropes and turns things on its head and does a lot of unexpected stuff. And he's got this great line toward the beginning when he says, "Note to self: do not use the internet to find henchmen." And that was like 3 pages in. Totally sold me on this, and I didn't disappoint after that. I really enjoyed everything about this. There's also this great place after we go to our main heroes of the book, a father-son couple, where things feel a little bit more grounded, even though this guy's an inventor and he's dealing with alien technology. We don't find out until a little bit later, but I guess I gave that away, but it's not a big deal. That's kind of the big premise of this. And anyway, but besides that, the world suddenly feels a lot more grounded, and I start to wonder if the tone's going to be at odds. And then the subplots converge quickly, and it doesn't have any trouble keeping up with what it is at all, and keeping me along for the ride. But there's this wonderful line right after that when we go back to Dr. Cruel, where we go back to the absolute crazy insanity that we open the book with, when the narration box says, "Meanwhile, at the edge of believability," and that really got me too. I thought that was wonderful. This father-son duo is really believable and very sympathetic. They have a difficult time getting along because they're too much alike. I think this is a book that is a whole lot of fun, but it's also got nuggets of wisdom and maybe has some nice moral lessons that kids can learn from and that adults can be reminded of without it being too heavy-handed and preachy. It's very it's really smart about that stuff where I don't feel like I'm being talked down to or, like I said, preached at, but it's just really honest about it. It feels like somebody writing from his heart who's who's doing what the best writers do, which is giving you, which is finding some kind of a truth, be it a personal truth or universal truth, through their fiction writing. And I was seeing that all over the place in this comic, and that's why I really appreciate it. And also, it's just a whole lot of fun. There's this really cool invention in this that turns any object into any other object you can think of that is the same size, and that's used to great effect because the father's an inventor and his son is an artist who has a really wild imagination. So you put those two things together, and some really fun things can be done with that technology. The way the subplots converge is that Dr. Cruel is after that technology, and he sends his incompetent henchmen to go find it. I really like the art in this. It is kind of cartoony, but in places, but it also feels like it's kind of aping a lot of mid-90s stuff, and some even like goofy 90s like edgy tropes are kind of played with here, and I feel like that's on purpose as far as this looking sort of like a 90s comic. Anyway, I really like this and highly recommend it. Just have a couple more things to talk about today. The next one is Buffy the Vampire Slayer number 19. Captain Logan, why are you reviewing Buffy number 19? I thought this was the #1 show. Well, I don't know if this is a jumping on point, but it's a really good standalone issue that can be read without having looked at any of Buffy Season 10, or I would say any of the Buffy comics at all. If you have a pretty good knowledge base for Buffy, if you were a casual or a really active viewer of that show, and you know Buffy pretty well, and you at least like and know something about the character of Giles, you owe it to yourself to pick up this book. This is written by Christos Gage and Nicholas Brendan. Nicholas Brendan has been helping out a lot with this book this year, and this is, of course, published by Dark Horse. I fell off this book, planning on getting it and maybe reviewing it later on in trade, but was loving what I was reading before I fell off of it, and I think that this year, at least this season with Buffy, the best and the not as good books have kind of flipped. Now, Angel and Faith might be totally different now, but while I was reading it, and I read it up through, I don't know, like issue 8 or 9, I felt like Buffy was the stronger book and Angel and Faith was the slightly weaker book. Both were really good. And season 9, I felt the exact flip of that. I thought Angel and Faith was just absolutely phenomenal. But I think what happened originally was that the Angel and Faith team actually came over and did this. But I don't know if I'm remembering that right, because it's been a while. Anyway, what happens in this, a really simple story, but as I said, really easy to pick up and just read. By the way, how cool is this Hulk tribute cover? That's one of the reasons to get this. Just put it in your collection. This is great. This is every bit as good as all the tribute covers that McFarlane was doing a couple of years ago with Spawn. And anyway, and this factors really wonderfully into the identity stuff in this issue and what it means to grow up, and what it might be like if you had to live your life over again. So if you're not familiar with Buffy Season 10, and this book and this issue I think does a really good job of bringing you into it without really trying that hard, this is what's been going on with Giles is, at the spoiler alert, in Season 9 Giles gets killed and he's brought back to life in Season 10, but the kicker is he's a child now. He's like prepubescent, just going through puberty, and he has all of his memories, but because he's a kid again, and the way his mind works, just being a kid again, and what he looks like, and I think that there's a lot of sophistication in how much your looks and the way people perceive you factors into who you are. He really is a kid again. He's not just an older man trapped in a kid's body. He really is having a second childhood, and he's given the chance here to be an adult again, but only for 48 hours. And I really like that we're not just already making him an adult again, but we give him the chance in this kind of one-and-done story to get to be himself again. And Giles has to, suddenly, being his adult self again, figure out that the world really has changed, and he can't, even for a little bit of time, be exactly who he was before. He's a child trapped in a man's body, and one of the things that's really interesting about it is that it's not just because he's changed and he's gone through death. And remember that with Buffy and Angel and really some other things too, Whedon and Christos Gage does a great job keeping to this. Whedon always has this idea that if you could bring somebody back to life, it would almost be more trouble than it was worth. Like, there are always consequences to something that drastic, that an end is an end. Even if you were to get to start over, it's still an end, and coming back would be something else entirely. And so Giles has this kind of wonderful gift of getting to live his life over again, but it's not living his life over, it's living another life. And there's this wonderful distinction made between those two things. But also, the world has changed, and we're in a world now, and again, if you've not read any of 8, 9, or 10, this does a great job of just telling you this and bringing you in, that, but I guess I'll tell you too, that what's happened is that everybody in the world now knows about the supernatural, and so Giles can't be a watcher anymore, and he finds himself in his old body immediately acting like he used to when he's talking to Buffy and Willow and the other members of the gang. But everybody knows who Buffy is now. They all know she's the Slayer. There are other Slayers, and more importantly, she's grown up now, and there's this wonderful like subplot and parallel subplots dealing with fathers and what it means to be a father, but also what it means to be a father to someone who has grown up and doesn't need you anymore. And Buffy has to deal with her real father in this, who has never really been a father to her, and both of them kind of relearn why Giles was more of a real father to her than even her real father, but that she doesn't need him anymore, and that he's not really that person anymore. I thought that the whole thing was incredibly touching. It was really sad, but it was also really funny in a lot of places as well. And as I said, if you are a Buffy fan at all, regardless of if you've ever read a Buffy comic, I think you really kind of owe it to yourself to pick this one up and put it in your collection. This was, this is one I think that if this were still on television, this would be one of those, kind of like The Body and The Gentleman. This would be one of those really memorable episodes that people would always kind of look back on and call back to. And it also felt, because Gage has such, and Brendan, but I think Gage is probably writing most of the dialogue in this, not sure, but probably. He has a really good voice for all these characters, but especially Giles in this, and it really feels like while I'm reading it that I'm watching an episode that is a return of Anthony Stewart Head. And it's really kind of fun because this, of course, would have a Giles that would have to be played by a kid, so to suddenly get to see Anthony Stewart Head return and to read a comic book where you're still really kind of getting that experience. Impressive work. Really, really happy with this. Good stuff. The last thing I want to mention is a book that actually came out a few weeks ago. The second issue is out now. I'm just going to talk about the first, mostly to encourage people to pick this up if this is your kind of thing. This is a new gritty crime drama published by Image called Beauty, and this is written by Jeremy Hahn and Jason Hurley with art by John Runch. And this is a really interesting premise. What we have here is an STD that people actually want. What a bizarre notion. And of course, obviously, even just with that premise, this is a very adult book. It's not super vulgar. It's got F-bombs and things, but it doesn't overuse that. This strikes me as a as a well-written rated R film, and with the main topic that we're dealing with, it really earns its darkness, but also in its grittiness. And it is a really good-looking, gritty crime book, as I said. But it so it earns that, but it also earns the violence and what language is there. Anyway, the idea is it's an STD that makes you beautiful, and it's called Beauty. And what happens is if you have sex and get it, you no matter what you look like, you end up looking like the very best possible version of yourself, and maybe even a version that could not have naturally happened without what happened without this STD. And it's hard not to think of it like a drug, because it isn't, but people are actually going out and seeking it, and it's really sad because it's a really weird, sad human nature thing, because the way it's presented feels like exactly what would actually happen. This struck me as a really realistic way to do this, and or like if this were to happen. It's kind of dark speculative fiction. If this were to happen, this is how people would react. I really like the main character so far I'm interested in, but the thing that I'm most impressed with is how this book deals with the culture and the impact that beauty has on the culture. So there are all these different sects of people that have different opinions, of course, about this thing. Some of them are for it and think that people should try to get it on purpose. This kind of social commentary about the consequences that come from being irresponsible with something, like having sex, and what would happen if all of a sudden it looked like not only would you not, could you do this and nothing bad would happen to you necessarily, but also that you could, and I'm talking about just like sleeping with whoever, one night stands, that kind of thing, but also that you could do that and it would actually give you a thing that you would want. But of course there are side effects, and then possibly death. It's the end of that commercial, and of course, and that surprises no one, but the extreme nature of how it kills you, and I won't give that away, when we get there, is crazy. I was surprised we got there already in the first issue, but it gives you mild headaches, like perpetual mild headaches, but people don't mind because it makes them look perfect, but then there's other sects that are trying to get people not to do this, and some even violently, and like I said, our main characters are police officers, one who already has beauty and contracted it accidentally. It wasn't one of these people that was going and trying to get it, and then the other one doesn't. And but then the ending cliffhanger is a somewhat surprising one, and definitely gripping and makes you want to keep reading. I like this a lot. I thought that this was pretty mature in the right way, in a good way. This was handled, I thought, in a really grown-up, mature way, and is kind of a scary but fascinating idea, and I really dug that. A lot of just really creative stuff going on with these creator-owned things. Image has had that reputation for a while. It is still very well deserved. You got people like Jeremy Hahn going off and trying these really original, neat ideas. Some of the best supernatural, fascinating, brand new, can't believe nobody ever thought of it before kinds of stuff are happening right now in comics, and a lot of them are happening at Image. Well, that's all I've got for you today, folks. As I said, the second issue of that is out right now, but I wanted to go ahead and talk about the first one for you here on the #1 show. If you are ever in the Kansas City area, check out Elite Comics. Fantastic store. I sure appreciate them. And if you ever want to send me anything to review on the Comic Vault, you can always send things to our P.O. Box. The P.O. Box is there on your screen. And thanks again for watching. Sure appreciate it. I'll be back with you once again for some more Comic Vaults and another #1 show here in the not-too-distant future. I'm Captain Logan, and happy reading.